We live in an age of unquestioned ideas, believed by the world as religious truths, handed down to humanity in ancient times by the gods. Some are noble, some are foolish, and some are downright dangerous. Among these ideas is the myth, men are privileged. A myth repeated so often, so mechanically, that it's no longer tested, only enforced. Global industries and systems have been built and sustained on this myth. Corporations, governments, and institutions have sucked the life out of men based on this myth. Many have become filthy rich after effectively and efficiently exploiting the idea that men are privileged. But I ask you, men of the world, to pause and think. Are you truly privileged? Do you feel privileged? O men of the Titanic, if you can hear me, I implore you to reflect not on what you've been told, but on what you've lived. In this tragic night, tell me you are privileged as the icy waters claw at your boots, while lifeboats drift away, filled with women and children. Do you feel privileged as duty and chivalry condemn you to the unforgiving sea, your breath frozen by frost and fear? Does privilege comfort you as the horrifying darkness of the Atlantic opens its jaws, swallowing your cries, your dreams, your lives, leaving only the haunting silence of sacrifice behind? If you are a man, do you feel privileged on dating sites, where you're swiping and swiping, your hopes, like the batteries on your phone, dwindling down? Are you privileged when 90% of women are pursuing only 10% of men to whom they offer themselves as a carnivore's banquet, leaving you invisible in a digital wasteland? And when the 10% has used them up and cast them out, turn around and yell at all men, including you, useless, dishonest, cheaters? Or do you feel extra privileged when those rare matches ghost you, vanish like vapor, with nothing but a sting to remind you they were ever there? Do you feel privileged when the dating world demands you pay for the first date, the second date, the third, always paying? And then you stumble upon her TikTok, where she describes you in vivid detail, mocking your effort, your awkwardness, your wallet. Ah yes, privilege. Do you feel privileged when society assumes the worst of you simply because of your gender? When you're automatically suspect, not because of what you've done, but because of who you are. A man, a potential predator, a villain in waiting. Every glance you give, every word you speak is scrutinized for malice, and yet they call it privilege. And when the bugles sound, when the war machine churns to life, do you feel privileged to be drafted, shipped off, and fed into the meat grinder of history? The front lines are your inheritance. Cannon fodder, human shields, heroes perhaps, but only when you're 6 feet under. Is this the privilege they sing of? Do you feel privileged waking up before dawn, lacing up steel-toed boots and heading out to build the world everyone else takes for granted? Roads, bridges, sewers, electrical grids, oil rigs, skyscrapers, your blood, sweat and tears hold them together. But do they hold you in esteem? Does society honor the men who risk life and limb? Or are you simply a cog, a disposable part, to be replaced when broken? After a grueling day of labor, do you feel privileged to come home to a wife who greets you not with warmth but contempt and complaints? Why aren't you doing enough around here? She asks, as though the 10 hours of physical and mental exhaustion you endured that day to provide for the household weren't enough. Do you feel privileged when the house you pay for feels like someone else's castle, and you, the unwanted guest? Do you feel privileged when you're told to do your own dishes, cook your own meals, clean your own clothes, iron your own shirts, but still foot the bill for rent, utilities, phone bills and Wi-Fi? Ah, the life of a privileged man, expected to provide everything and receive nothing, to sacrifice endlessly and be told it's not enough. Do you feel privileged to be invisible to society unless you're wealthy or powerful? Walk down the street. Do women notice you? Do they see you at all? Unless you're driving a luxury car, wearing a designer suit, and flaunting an air of affluence, you are, for all intents and purposes, a shadow, the invisible man. And then there's marriage, the crowning jewel of male privilege. Do you feel privileged when your wife one day decides she's had enough, not of marriage, but of you? Do you feel privileged when she files for divorce and takes half, no, more than half of everything you've worked for? Your savings, your retirement fund, your children, your house, your car, all gone. Do you feel privileged paying alimony to the woman who divorced you, ensuring that her lifestyle remains comfortable while yours crumbles? Do you feel privileged when your job, whether as a construction worker, a firefighter, or a miner, puts your life at greater risk than almost anyone else's? Do you feel privileged to know that statistically, your odds of dying at work are astronomically higher than those of women? The graveyards are full of men who died in service to a society that barely remembers their names. And let us speak of mental health. Do you feel privileged knowing that as a man your pain is silent? Your tears are invisible. Society tells you to man up, to bury your emotions deep, to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders without so much as a sigh. Do you feel privileged knowing that men account for the vast majority of suicides? That despair festers in silence, while society looks the other way. Ah, but they say you have power, that you're the ruler of this world, the beneficiary of centuries of patriarchal conquest. But tell me this, what use is power if it crushes the soul of the one who wields it? What comfort is privilege when it chains you to expectations you never chose, burdens you never asked for? They tell you that male privilege is real, but they don't tell you the cost, the silent sacrifices, the invisible scars, the thankless toil. They don't tell you that being a man often means being disposable, valued only for what you can produce, what you can provide, what you can protect. They don't tell you that privilege is a myth, a narrative designed to guilt you, shame you, silence you. But men of the world, hear me now. You are not villains. You are not monsters. You are human beings, and your worth is not measured by your utility, your wealth, or your sacrifices. It is measured by the simple fact of your existence. So, men of the world, unite. Stand tall and together in the spirit of global brotherhood. Reject the lies. Refuse the guilt. Embrace your humanity, not the caricature society has painted, but the full, complex, flawed, beautiful reality of who you are. You are not a burden. You are not an oppressor. You are not disposable. And to the world that insists otherwise, let us ask again, who is truly privileged? Is it the man who is invisible, disposable, and forgotten? Or is it the society that takes him for granted, uses him up and casts him aside? We may never receive an honest answer, but we know the truth. And the truth will set us free.